Hi everyone, I'm back with another tutorial, this time about how to color hair. So if you remember last time we worked on the flesh tone here, and I've already filled in her eyes and lips. So today we will work on her hair, and these are the pencils which I will be using. I decided that she will be a brunette. And all of these colors are available, or I got them all at together in a box of 48. So we have a brown, 480, 444, and 476. You might be wondering why I have blue here, but I will explain that later on. And then aside from brown, I think that her hair needs a few highlights because she is, after all, a New Yorker, according to the book. And I decided that her highlights will be purple. So again, these are part of the set of 48s for the Faber Castell watercolor pencil line. And this is 437 and 435. Okay, so let's get started. So I always get the question, how do you color hair, especially when there's so many strands, and how do you know where highlights go? So as a general rule of thumb, I like to start off with my middle tone, or my middle color, which means it's neither darkest nor the lightest, and I use it to color in everything except for the highlights, which means that I'm going to leave the highlights out. I will use the white of the paper so that that's what's going to show up as the highlights for her hair. And generally, so that you have a good idea where it will fall, I trace a really light outline of where I want it to go. What I do is I observe where the curves are, and at the highest point of this curve, for example, this lock of hair of hers, this is the highest point, which means most likely the sun or whatever light source hits it the most. So I will avoid that, and I tend to make it uneven. I hope you can see my slight outline. So I'll color it in. Again, if you watched my last tutorial, since these are watercolor pencils, I'm not too concerned if the coloring strokes are a little messy, because these are very easily fixed later on once we start painting. Okay, so as you can see, I've started avoiding the part where I think the highlights should go. And if you can see from the strokes, I try not to make it too even, because after all, it's hair. And it's really hard to predict or for hair to have really straight highlights. So here again, if you see the curve of the hair, I will avoid that part since it's the highest point. I will just go into it a little bit. So the same for this part. I will just avoid it. And it's really nice when you're successful in coloring in the highlights of hair, because it really brings the coloring book to life. Now, as a tip, try to understand where there is hair underneath another lock of hair. So for example, this area here definitely falls under. So I want to shade that a little bit darker to show depth. And then again, we'll just leave where I think the highlight should fall. And here, maybe a little bit underneath here. Okay, and then I will continue on. Again, this is a book by Suwa. The title of the coloring book is Look, and it is published by Coloring Today. And I really love this book. It's just my cup of tea. Anyway, here we go. So more highlights. More highlights. Again, if you can see, I am avoiding the top curves of the hair, and that's where I always keep it light so that it looks more curvy, it looks more alive. Alright, so that's one side of her hair. Now, if you can tell, even the artist gives us clues where the hair is darker. So this part is definitely darker. So almost all of this will have no highlights since it's behind her head. Okay. And then I will leave a certain portion of her hair so that I can color it in with her highlighted hair. So let's skip that part. Again, curved, avoid that. And bottom. Okay. And maybe a little bit of brown underneath. And then I want part of this to be purple. So I'll switch to my purple. So I have two shades. I'll use the redder shade or the lighter shade first because I will use the darker purple later on to create my shadows. So again, for this part of the hair, this is the most curved area, so I will avoid that. And again here. Color it in. And I really wish that sometimes I could have hair this long and this straight and this shiny, but it is not to be because my hair is curly and frizzy. So anyway, so see where the highlights are going. Okay, once you have everything in, as I've shown you before, we'll go over it with water. And again, the kind of brush that I prefer to use is an angle brush. I hope you can see in the camera. Okay. I use an angle brush because the angle helps me cover large areas quickly and find areas just by turning the brush. Okay. And as always, have some tissue ready because my big tip for using watercolor pencils would be to always be careful with the amount of water you put. So dip your brush in water, blot. Okay, you never want to have too much water on your brush because it will tend to erase the colors on your paper. So what's beautiful about watercolor pencils is that as soon as you get the wet brush hits it, the colors come alive. Okay, so right here you can tell I have too much water, so you want to keep dabbing, remove the extra, and then still avoid the white parts. Okay. Okay, so I will basically just go over all of this with my water, and then I'll be right back. Alright, okay, so I'm back and I've managed to put all the water. I've run through everything with water, and now that it's dry, again, I would repeat this tip. Make sure that it's not cold to the touch, because if you start coloring while the paper is still wet, the paper will just get torn because the paper is weak from the water, and you might end up tearing a hole through your precious page. So of course we want to be careful with that. So I want to do her highlights first. Remember, we had two shades. We had a reddish purple and a darker purple. So this time I'll just go through with very lightly with the red purple. And it's nice if you could notice that, see, all our strokes have been hidden because the pencil has melted. So it looks really nice and neat now. And then using your darker purple, that's where you put in all the shadows. So underneath her cap, maybe here where her hair sort of like folds in. So the same thing here where it's sort of tucked into that large lock of brown hair, and the tips. Okay, there's really no hard and fast rule on where to put your shadows. However, it really just by feel. So right there, so I'm happy with how her highlights are coming out. So now let's do the browns. If you can see, I have this darker brown now, and again I will just go through with it and mix up the brown shadows. Okay. Once you put in shadows, it really makes the hair more three-dimensional. And if you pay attention to the artist's rendering, you can tell which hair is above, which hair is below everything else. So try to follow those and get some ideas from other artworks, or you could look at real people's hair and see how it behaves once you start coloring. So there. So quite happy with that, how it's shaping up. And then finally, if you remember, I brought out some blue a while ago and showed you guys, because blue serves a really good purpose in adding shadows to hair. That's another of my tips. Instead of using black, unless you're coloring black hair, of course, I like using blue to do shadows, because I find that using blue makes the hair more three-dimensional, and or to put it another way, if you just put all browns, the hair seems to be more one note-ish. So I like adding some blue, and then the blue really deepens the shadows and brings out the highlights. Okay, so those are my general tips in coloring brown hair using watercolor pencils. If you have any questions, just feel free to ask me in the comments or on Facebook. You can find me at whencathycolors on Facebook and on YouTube. So I hope this tutorial helps in some way. So thank you for watching. See you guys.